Hello, my name is Rachel Madden. I'm the Director of Operations at MedStar Ambulance in Warren, Ohio. Today we're going to be covering the non-emergency medical transport program created specifically for wheelchair drivers, which is a requirement which we're going to talk about here in a couple of minutes. This program is designed specifically to be in accordance with the state guidelines. It's one of 3 programs that's been approved by the state of Ohio in order to certify wheelchair drivers, and it strongly adheres to the Medicare, Medicaid, and motive care requirements in order to maintain appropriate fleet management. So this course will be composed of 3 or 4 videos which can be watched in succession. There is a student handbook portion that will be given out along with a written test that will need to be proctored at the end of the program. So let's begin. So there are a few quick facts regarding persons with disabilities. Around 56.7 million people living in America are currently listed as having some form of a disability. That would be 1 in 5. Take a second and hold your hand up and then put down one of your fingers and then decide how well your hand would work without it. Chances are you know someone coping with a disability. In the state of Ohio, the definition of NEMT is non-emergency medical transportation. This means that there is no expectation of any medical intervention needing to occur. That is not to say that you don't equip your people with the ability to handle an emergency if it arises, but we are not certifying people to become professional rescuers in any way. Vehicle operators need to possess a good working knowledge of the area they operate in to predetermine the nearest medical facility for such purposes. So, the responsibility that is placed upon us is that we make sure that our drivers all have the following qualifications. First of all, this certification that we are doing now needs to be maintained annually. Second, your drivers need to abide all safety laws and stay free of distraction. Also, they must maintain a physical capability for transport, which requires an annual physical that is kept in their employee file. They need to have a good working knowledge of the vehicle and its equipment, patient documentation, patient privacy, and company procedures. Working in a professional manner with patients and families is crucial to your company and to your overall progress in the field. All necessary vehicle inspections will need to be done by these individuals, and we're going to talk a little bit about how inspections should be done. So we're going to progress into the first section of the program, which is safe drivers and defensive drivers. A safe driver is just simply a person who's looking around for hazardous situations and driving in a way where they can avoid a hazardous situation if possible. A defensive driver is a person that, when faced with a hazardous situation or some other kind of situation, is responding in a safe and proper manner in order to avoid the likelihood of a crash. Unsafe attitudes can be attributed to instances of road rage. And we've all had road rage before. Behind the wheel, someone cuts us off, makes us angry. Road rage causes a driver to throw the rules of common sense by the wayside. A safe driving attitude is the glue that holds everything together on the road, especially when transporting patients. So, some general rules for safe driving. Do not tailgate. Crowding the vehicle in front of you makes it more likely that you'll make contact with that vehicle, especially if the driver suddenly brakes or if the roads are wet. There's a 4-second rule that applies here. When a vehicle is ahead of you, if you pass a fixed object while riding behind that vehicle, you should be able to count to 4 before that vehicle passes the object. So one more time. A vehicle in front of you passes a telephone pole. You should be able to count to 4 until you pass the same telephone pole. That allows you to know that you are a clear distance away from the vehicle in front of you. If you count less than 4, then you are too close. And then turn signals are a must. Even when in turn signal lanes, even when in parking lots, turn signals are necessary. Some other safe driving principles. Maintaining an appropriate speed. Remember, this is not an emergency vehicle. We are discussing a vehicle here that is licensed sheerly for non-emergency transport. So maintaining the speed limit or below the speed limit in bad weather conditions is a must. And then we need to inject ourselves into our environment. Anticipate the need to brake or scan the environment and watch for other drivers and pedestrians. It's very important that we discuss cell phone use. With regard to cell phones, it is not just encouraged, but a company policy of ours that while driving, cell phones are to be stowed away. Use of a personal cell phone should never happen during transport unless there is a life-threatening emergency, a crime is witnessed, you observe a serious accident or fatality, there's a fire, there's a traffic hazard in the roadway, or you encounter a reckless or suspected intoxicated driver. Every attempt should be made to safely stop the vehicle operation before using a cell phone, regardless of the reason. Smoking is, of course, prohibited in all non-emergency transport vehicles. It also should never happen in front of patients, staff, patients' families, or on the grounds of any facility associated with transport. Obviously, most wheelchair vans do have oxygen on board or patients who wear oxygen, which is highly flammable, but also the smell and the other general hazard of having smoke in the vehicle is not only unacceptable, but it's not healthy and it's not safe. Texting while driving. A car driver dialing a cell phone is 2.8 times more likely to get into a crash than a non-distracted driver. A driver talking on their phone is 1.3 times more likely to get into an accident. But texting is the worst of them all. Texting does not only lead to many accidents, but it's incredibly preventable. Under no circumstances can drivers be texting, not while transporting patients or in an empty company vehicle. There is a multitude of required vehicle equipment that is set forth by the state of Ohio that must be on board the vehicle in order for it to be functional. All of these items can be found in the Ohio EMS website under Ambulette requirement forms. First of all, there must be, of course, functional seat belts. There also needs to be a wheelchair ramp system or lift system that needs to have been properly maintained, including any preventative maintenance on electrical parts. An ADA-approved wheelchair security restraint system is also necessary. We're going to talk about those later on in the program. A step stool will be necessary for wheelchair units that are higher off the ground than your standard vehicle. Registration certificates or photocopies of registration and insurance certificates should be stowed away in the glove box or visor in the instance that that information is needed. And then you also need to have a functional auxiliary equipment kit. You need first aid supplies, which need to not only be stowed away safely where they can't fly around the cabin, but also need to be not expired. The equipment in that list of first aid supplies can be found in the form referenced earlier. Fire extinguisher emergency breakdown kit and seatbelt cutter also need to be there. Fire extinguishers, of course, have to have preventative maintenance on them once a year, so this needs to be current to the year that you are in. And the seatbelt cutter also needs to be stowed in a place where it can be readily reached, but not able to fly into the cabin or cause any damage. Vehicles need to have a working horn and working signals. There must be a biohazard containment kit. These items also do expire, so please check your expiration. Headlights, taillights, windshield wipers, brake lights, and turn signals all must work. Mirrors must be used, but not just used, able to be seen through. And then a window breaker is a must. Most of the time, seatbelt cutters and window breakers are a combo unit that you can purchase. General standards and vehicle safety features. We're going to talk about this very briefly. Of course, as we get into the discussion about vehicles and their features, each company is going to have different features amongst their vehicles. These are just going to be general standard features that the majority of vehicles have. So let's take a look at some regulations that need to be observed for the safety of employees. Only the unit operator, meaning the driver or the attendant, is authorized to use vehicle equipment and operational controls. At no point should an attendant's facility staff or patient be responsible for opening a door, unloading a ramp, turning on a turn signal, turning on a vehicle. At no point should any equipment within the vehicle be managed by anybody but the driver. It's important to watch overhead clearances when in a tall vehicle. It's important to know the height of your vehicle before you start driving so that passengers inside of the vehicle or around the vehicle are safe. When loading or unloading on the traffic side, transport operators are cautioned to use extreme care. Other things that may be provided for your drivers include caution cones and signs to allow them enough safe space to remove their patient from the vehicle. There are specific disabled vehicle procedures, which include immediately reporting your situation to the supervisor and the dispatch center. It's important that at any time, if there's a breakdown or any sudden mechanically disabling occurrence, that the dispatch center and the supervisor are contacted. And then, all information concerning the breakdown itself needs to be told to your passenger, which is your patient, and also to your dispatch center and supervisor. Vehicle fires, while uncommon, can happen. And if a vehicle becomes disabled because of a fire, it is an emergency. And there's a safety procedure in order to handle that. First of all, the main priority is to evacuate all passengers in the vehicle and to contact 911 immediately. The incident will need to be reported to dispatch and then your supervisor when it is safe to do so. You should communicate as calmly as possible and be descriptive into your situation, such as exact location, status of passengers, or the origin of the fire, such as it's coming from the front passenger side, engine compartment, and so on. It's important that you evacuate and secure the safety of your passenger prior to doing any of these things, meaning that if it's cold outside, you put a blanket on them, or you secure them in some kind of way with wheel locks and so on, and put them in a position where they're safely stowed, not somewhere where they could be hit by a vehicle. There are a multitude of vehicle safety features that are fairly standard on most vehicles. One of the vehicle safety features we're going to talk about are seatbelts. When fitted with a seatbelt assembly, you have each seatbelt anchored, secured, and each buckle retractor shall operate as intended. The seatbelt webbing is visibly not damaged to reduce its safety effectiveness. With seatbelts, you have a mechanism within the seatbelt where if you do slam on the brakes and the belt is jerked forward, it will lock. That is preventing the person who's being restrained from flying forward and hitting anything in front of them. Seatbelts are made of a special webbing that can generally only be cut with a seatbelt cutter, which is why the requirement is necessary for the vehicle. And seatbelts should be throughout the wheelchair vehicle, including a shoulder belt that should be applied to all patients in wheelchairs in the rear of the vehicle, along with the restraint system on the floor, which we will talk about later on in the program. Emergency exits are something that your drivers need to be aware of and are not the same in every single vehicle. So you want to ensure the operation and lack of obstacles with doors and windows. So it would be important when setting up your wheelchair van to ensure that you are not placing a wheelchair strapped against a window that is used for extrication, that you're not installing an oxygen cylinder holder or fire extinguisher holder in a position where it could block exit through an emergency exit. Obviously, in most situations, any window or door can serve as an emergency exit, and the window punch is necessary for breaking glass in the case that there's entrapment in the vehicle. A fire extinguisher is also required in your vehicle. It needs to have a valid preventative maintenance sticker for the current year that you are in. And there needs to be some small amount of training on how to use a fire extinguisher. Do not assume that your employees know how to use a fire extinguisher just because they've seen a fire extinguisher. There are 3 different types of fire extinguishers that we're going to discuss here today. The type A, which is for combustible materials, the type B, which is for flammable liquids, and the type C, which is for electrical equipment. The type of fire extinguisher that should be in your vehicle should be the type that covers all 3 of these types. Passenger transport vehicles are required by law to carry at least 1 fire extinguisher. All non-emergency transport units should have a fire extinguisher that will extinguish all 3 types. The use of a fire extinguisher is written in the acronym PASS, P-A-S-S. Please refer to a video when discussing this with your employees. Pull the pin. The pin is located here around the inside of the handle of the fire extinguisher. You pull it and you twist it at the same time. You want to aim the nozzle, which is on the end of this black hose, at the base of the fire. Squeeze the handle and sweep the base of the fire in a zigzag pattern. Types of evacuation procedures. You should evacuate the vehicle if there's a fire, or if there's a potential that a fire is going to occur. The vehicle is perceived in a dangerous position, or if for any reason the vehicle itself is so disabled and so dangerous under any circumstances that it's not safe to remain inside. Types of evacuation include your front door, rear door, emergency window, and emergency roof hatch evacuation. Many of us don't have the emergency roof hatch. There are some basic causes of critical situations that occur while driving. One of them, especially in Ohio, is traction. It's important to starting, stopping, and turning any vehicle, and it can result in partial or total loss of vehicle control. Some of the problems with traction include overpowering and overbraking, steering and speed, unequal road surfaces, and hydroplaning. Unequal road surfaces are very common in our area. Lots of potholes. Hydroplaning is also very common in our area. One of the major problems we have in northeastern Ohio is black ice. And that is the sun has been out all day, melting the water on the road. Night has come, and the road doesn't seem to be icy, but it is. There are many causes for critical situations, which include loss of brakes, blowing out a tire, your accelerator sticking, or engine malfunction. Especially in vehicles that drive a multitude of miles every single day, these are very common things that can happen. It's important that when you're managing a critical event such as this, that you follow steps in a specific way so that you don't negatively influence the driver's reaction. Lack of knowledge to your drivers will cause them to not be able to handle these types of situations. Even the most competent driver can be confronted by a critical situation and a hazard or a mechanical malfunction. And most of these forces are unpredictable obstacles. It's important to be aware of response procedures and be prepared for any situation. This can be done with an annual update of this program, ensuring that your personnel remember the important portions of this program in order to be most effective if anything goes wrong. Basic incident response should include having your passengers on board immediately evaluated for their condition. If anything is to happen in the vehicle, we obviously want to check on the passenger first. If no one is injured and the vehicle is in a traffic lane, try to safely get out of the way of other motorists. If someone is to rear end your vehicle and your passenger is not inherently injured, it's important to get that vehicle out of the line of traffic where it could be hit or struck by another vehicle. It's important to check to see if other vehicles, drivers, and passengers are injured and to call 911 immediately. And then notify your dispatch and supervisor that the event has occurred. Be prepared to provide details, specific details to the incident, what you saw, not what you perceived that you saw, which can be two very different things. In the instance that there is a loss of brakes, use the engine or e-brake or downshift. The e-brake is located in a multitude of different places on your vehicles, so please be sure to refer to the e-brake usage with your employees prior to them driving. Downshifting is usually done with the shift gear, and downshifting the vehicle into first gear or neutral is generally one of the best ways to slow the vehicle down. After the vehicle has been slowed down and brought to a stop, passengers should be evacuated, and the area around the vehicle should be secured. In the instance of a tire blowing out, if the front tire of the vehicle blows out, the vehicle will pull in the direction of the flat tire. If the rear tire of a vehicle blows out, the vehicle will swerve or sway. It's important to immediately reduce speed when you feel a vehicle pulling or swaying, and take your foot off of the accelerator. Avoid uncontrolled steering corrections. Pull to the side of the road only when you have control of the vehicle. The accelerator can stick. At times that an accelerator is sticking, the best thing to do is to cut the power to the wheels by shifting the vehicle into neutral through the shift gear. An engine does and will overheat, especially in summer temperatures, especially when a multitude of miles have been driven on the vehicle. There is a temperature gauge indicator or a warning light located on the dash, generally by the fuel gauge, and it can produce some evidence of white smoke or a strong acidic smell, acrid acidic smell, if the vehicle is overheating. It's important at that time to pull the vehicle to the side of the road and turn off the engine. Do not ever remove a radiator cap. They are under extreme pressure, and always call for assistance. In the incident that there is an incident or crash, it's important to fill out an incident or crash reporting form. Now, these forms are different per company, but we're going to talk about exactly what needs to be written in this form. This form is valuable information for the patient and the patient's family, the company, especially when the company needs to make modifications to the vehicles, and also for anybody else that may require this information, such as law enforcement. First of all, it's important for the driver to give exactly what occurred as soon as possible in writing, and what exactly they did in writing as soon as possible. The longer that they do not write the direct information, the more likely they are to forget details. Make sure that the driver or whoever is writing the report for the driver lists all the other vehicles and identify them as best as possible. So in the instance that there's an accident where a vehicle is rear-ended, it's important to list the other vehicle, including its color, make, model, and license plate number if it's available. If the opportunity presents itself to log a vehicle's license plate number of a witness that has witnessed the event, that's also important. And depending on the crash location and injuries, police will respond. The driver should be prepared to produce a valid driver's license and insurance documentation to the police officer. If there are no injuries, a company supervisor may request for a driver to exchange information with the other motorists and wait for a return to base for reporting purposes. So if you're on a private property or in a private parking lot and you're tapped on the side of the vehicle, it's acceptable to contact your supervisor, receive insurance information from the other party, and be permitted to leave the scene without calling the police. There are a multitude of environmental driving hazards, as before we had discussed black ice, which occurs in poor visibility after water melts on the road during the day, refreezes in the evening, and freezes as a dark color that isn't seen in the dark very well, as having variance between the road surface and the ice surface. If in the case that there is a breakdown, it's important that we have a blanket on board for our passengers. That should be stowed somewhere relatively safe in the vehicle. And then do not underestimate the effects of wind on a moving vehicle, especially our taller wheelchair vans. Believe it or not, we've actually seen vehicles in our company blown off the road and rolled through a field. It's important that drivers keep a strong grip on the steering wheel, slow down the speed to reduce the effect of powerful wind gusts in extreme conditions, or pull off of the road and wait. Contact your company regarding how to proceed if for any reason you run across winds that are so high that you feel as though it's not safe to drive the vehicle. There are mirror hazards. Of course, we all need to know that there are blind spots and that mirrors don't show us everything that's going on around the vehicle. The most effective way of eliminating danger is to keep your eyes on the road and to keep the use of your perception, your visual perception, the corner of your eye. There will be a practical exam at the end of this program. It will be covering everything that we have just discussed, including vehicle operation and familiarization, primary and secondary safety features, vehicle disability equipment, and getting familiar with that equipment, including the lift operation and identifying safety features. We'll be looking at passenger restraint systems and how those work and are maintained, and how to appropriately lock down a wheelchair. All of these portions must be marked off in your practical exam in order for your individuals to be certified. We're going to move into Module 2, which will be our next video, and we're going to be discussing passengers with disabilities. It is very important to the state of Ohio that our drivers not only have an empathetic attitude towards passengers with disabilities, but have a general working understanding of disabilities. And this is important by and large because those with disabilities definitely have different responses to our drivers that may be confused or misconstrued as behaviors when they are just simply not. So we will be moving into Module 2 in the next video. If you have any questions, please write them down at this time and present them to your trainer so that they can be discussed.